Oh no, it's crashing! It's crashing!
What's going on, guys? It's K-Dub here with another episode of Crypto Zombie. So today is Sunday. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having an awesome weekend. Having a look at what is going on. Bitcoin is up 1.36%. Basically, we are still going sideways. We have not done much. The most exciting thing that's really happened was this little quasi Bart Simpson pattern that we had where we dumped down to about 9,868. Then we did pump up to 10,372, dumped back down to about 9,976. But essentially, we're just in this little tiny range bouncing around. So if you're bored, raise your hand, because I can definitely sense there is a lot of complacency, a lot of boredom in the market. But I'm noticing that that boredom is starting to actually turn bearish. You're seeing mainstream media now start to get a little bit on the bearish side, right? At the same time, we're seeing a lot of bullish tweets and things of that nature coming out of these different exchange CEOs and stuff. So we're going to get to the bottom of that moving forward, having a look at what is going on. I do think that we're going to have a breakout probably sooner than most of us think. A lot of us were looking at around probably the end of this month, beginning of September. Well, we are getting towards the end of this month, and I think that we could be seeing one very soon. And I'm going to show you why in just a minute, but if that sounds good to you, well, you know what to do. Also, if you're not subscribed to the Crypto Zombie channel, well, we do this every single day. And don't forget, tomorrow is the Ledger Nano S giveaway. All you got to do is drop a comment below and you are eligible. So that being said, let's dive in. Let's have a look. You notice that Bitcoin dominance has actually gone up about 0.3% since yesterday. Now, we do have Bitcoin on CoinMarketCap sitting around $10,098. We do have some gainers today. ABBC coin 30%, Holo 9%, Insight Chain, IOTA, Ontology, Cardano, Ethereum Classic, Sia Coin, Metaverse, Omisego, all doing quite well. Fear and Greed Index back down to 33. But once again, having a look at what is going on with the charts, we are stuck between the same moving averages that we've been stuck between. Like I said, these markets are almost boring right now. However, just remember that when we're having this sideways action, this is the time to be accumulating. Not financial advice, but I do know that in the past, when we tend to look back on these situations where Bitcoin sort of just coils and coils, right? People go, damn, I wish I bought more, right? But if you guys do want to know more about like these crazy different levels that we're looking at, definitely check out yesterday's video we did with Crown. I'll drop that above for you guys. That goes into all of the major levels that we are looking at. Also, shout out to the community, whoever did this. I've never seen myself as a cartoon before, so kind of feels cool being a meme, not gonna lie. But that being said, let's dive through these charts really quick, because I do have some interesting topics I want to go over today. Some of them you may argue are borderline conspiracy, right? Those are always fun. So talking about the charts, you notice that we are still supported by this upwards trend. We haven't fallen into the red zone yet, so no reason to be extremely bullish or bearish, just yet. Currently, we are still just going sideways on this trend. We are respecting this curve. You are noticing that we're putting in higher lows. This is good. This is a good short-term indicator, right? Having a look at this. Now, this is basically what I was saying. You see, we are in this gigantic wedge right here, but we've started to put in more of a support in this tiny triangle right here. You can see where we basically keep wicking down to about that $9,500 level, which is why a lot of people are saying we could be going down towards 9,500, because you'll notice now we have this resistance that's formed right here, and it looks like we actually want to have a breakout around September 4th, but we do know that Bitcoin tends to be an impatient asset, right? So I do wonder if we could be seeing that break down or break out actually even sooner than this, maybe within the next few days, maybe in the next week or so. Let me know what you think, but I'm noticing that we do have this downwards pressure now, so I am keeping my eyes on that. If we kind of shift the charts over to just the resistance and support, you do notice that we do have that $9,500 level, but if we were to fall below that, well, then the next level is around 9,000. It's kind of like that $9,300 level that we were talking about for quite some time. But interestingly enough, if we just zoom out, this actually looks like we're forming a wedge within the wedge. And the fact that we have this volume dropping down right here says to me that we could be looking, I'm not saying for maybe a massively explosive move, but we could be seeing a move back up to sort of test the top of this downtrend, which actually, if I go back here, That could be sort of low 11,000s, 11,200, 11,400. So I'm just saying keep your eyes on that. I'm not saying we're going to do that, but it is possible moving forward. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is the Bitcoin dominance, pulled down overnight, and now it looks like it's going back up again. So, once again, is it alt season? We saw some of the altcoins pumping, and then, Bitcoin started to take over the dominance again. So this is just what we're seeing time and time again. But here's something really interesting. So Brian Armstrong, who is the CEO of Coinbase, actually this article that he tweeted, by the way, is about a year old. Bitcoin is the new Birkin bag. But anyway, he says, for better or worse, I do think owning one whole Bitcoin will increasingly become a big deal. Only 21 million will ever be produced, and some people already own much more than one. And then in the same hand, you have CZ saying, if you own one Bitcoin, you are mathematically guaranteed to be the top 3 out of a million richest in the world. I guess he did some math where he did 21 million Bitcoin, over 7 billion roughly people in the world. Okay, the math, whatever, like this guy says, not all people will own Bitcoin. Dividing by 7 billion is kind of random. Assuming stakeholders now remain the stakeholders, Bitcoin never reaches adoption. He said this was reckless, but you are seeing this. You're seeing positivity. Now, obviously, these guys have incentive, right? I mean, every time transactions happen, these guys are taking their cut, right? But then you're seeing mainstream media, CNBC, Brian Kelly coming out saying, well, I'm not too sure about that, right? Well, what was one of your best things you could have done in 2018? Was the absolute opposite of whatever CNBC said, right? Now, does that mean the same thing when we're in a uptrend? Well, we're going to talk about that in just a second, but let me show you why BK is somewhat skeptical currently, and then I want to talk about it afterwards.
Cryptocurrency crawling back after crashing below 10,000 yesterday, but our very own Bitcoin baller says he's feeling a little bearish. He's got one chart to explain why, and before we get to the chart, the context of this is that it was heading towards its worst week since November or some crazy stat like that.
Yeah, we've been in this correction since 13,000, right? We had this huge run up to 13,000, and now we've pulled back. And part of the reason why is the fundamentals haven't really supported the reason why we went up. So the one thing that I look at for Bitcoin is active daily addresses. So this is active daily addresses, 30-day moving average. And what you can see has happened, that orange line is a trend line. You can see since the end of June, end of July, you've seen a drop off in active daily addresses. You might want to think of this as like MAUs or DAUs for a social network. That's what's happening here. So I think the price has got a little bit ahead of itself. That being said, there's going to be a chance here, and we saw it back in December and January of this year, for you to buy Bitcoin, and it's going to be a generational buy at that point. It's just not here, I don't think. So in the short term, I'm a little bit cautious.
What are the signs that you will look for that it's a generational buy?
So number one will be to see the price going down and those addresses going up. That's what we saw in December and January. We saw the price continue to crash down, and the activity on the network was really increasing. So that's probably the biggest thing I'll look for. Second thing is kind of the sentiment in terms of, all right, does everybody think Bitcoin's dead again? When people start saying that, then I'll get real.
Are there any other reasons why those addresses can go down?
Yeah.
Any other reasons why that it could be different this time? Or
so the reason why it could be different this time is there are a lot of institutions trading derivatives, right? So they're not necessarily getting a spot address like a bank account. So that could be what's going on here, and it's the first time we've seen it. So it could be different.
So I'm curious what you think about that there's not as many addresses being generated. I mean, does that show that there's not as many people coming into the space? It only makes sense, right? New people coming in would need a new address, right? People that are already in the space wouldn't need to generate new addresses. We would just send them to the addresses that we already have. But another point that he makes is when he talks about the derivatives. Now, you are noticing that a lot of futures trading has become very popular, right? You're seeing it with all these different types of derivatives. You're seeing it on the CME futures and things of that nature, right? But I do want to just remind everyone to just take things with a grain of salt when talking about what the mainstream media recommends or suggests might be happening. So that being said, though, you know that the gold bugs are taking every opportunity to be as vocal as possible about this. Peter Schiff, probably the leader of the pack. And once again, guys, I don't have anything against gold. You guys know that. It's just interesting how some guy like Peter Schiff always tends to really get pleasure out of just constantly bashing Bitcoin. Well, he says, I don't know why Bitcoin bugs are so excited about yesterday's small rise in price. During Bitcoin's bull market, yesterday's chaos would have sent its prices soaring 10% or more. Instead, it barely rose 2%, then surrendered all its gains and fell along with other risk assets. Now, number one, I don't recall anybody celebrating and getting excited over Bitcoin pumping that small percentage. So I don't know what he's talking about. That would be the first point. And I think he's specifically mentioning right here, Donald Trump basically went on a bit of a tweet storm. He started talking about more of these trading relationships with China, and we did actually have a subsequent spike. Now, some people are actually saying that it was sort of kind of a coincidence that Bitcoin was sort of looking to spike at that point anyway, but I think specifically that's what he was referring to. But, once again, we always have this gold versus Bitcoin argument, right? It's always gold versus Bitcoin. Which one is better, right? Well, I actually was going to talk about this article yesterday before I got interrupted, and we ended up literally doing an entire interview with Crown. But you could see Matthew Hogan, he's the global head of research at Bitwise Asset Management, and he argues that Bitcoin is too volatile to be considered a store of value. But this is the cool part. He says that's okay if you want to become wealthy. What you really want is an emerging store of value. So basically, this is what he says. He goes over, in the 1970s, gold was up 1,365%. But he says right here, the 70s was, of course, when the U.S. abandoned the gold standard. At that time, people didn't know what to make of gold. Would it succeed as a safe haven asset, untethered from the dollar, or can it be cast aside as just a barbarous relic, I'm a little tongue twisted today, as John Maynard Keynes once called it? Well, the result was a period of significant volatility. So they say as the two forces argued back and forth, there were years like in 1975 when gold tumbled in value, falling 25%, and then there were years like 1979 when gold pumped 120%. He also says that the daily price of volatility in the 1970s was not that different from Bitcoin's today. He says there were days when you would see it go up 3%, right? Well, obviously we even see bigger moves than that with Bitcoin. But that being said, he notes that just like the uncertainty about the future of gold back then made it a really risky asset to own, but it was that risk that led to gold's volatility and eventually over the long period of time, even though it did have a few rough years, strong returns, right? And that evidence mounted that gold would in fact continue to serve as a safe haven. So basically, he is comparing that to Bitcoin and thinks that Bitcoin is acting exactly like gold did back in the 1970s, which really would have been the time to get in, right? Because as you can see right here, gold didn't do so well in the 80s and 90s. In the 80s, it actually lost 22%. In the 90s, it lost 28%. But then in the 2000s and 2010s, it was up 281% and 50%. But obviously, the most gains were made in the beginning. And I do want to remind you guys how early we are. I'm going to get into that in just a second. But you could see Grayscale, they're one of the largest virtual currency managing companies basically on the market. They're basically accumulating 21% of all of the Bitcoin as it's mined, or that's what they said they were doing. I know they already own over 1% of the total supply, right? They actually did research and said that there's over 100,000 shops currently, shops, merchants, online stores, etc., that are actually accepting Bitcoin and allowing Bitcoin to be used as a means of payment. Because I've heard that argument also come up recently, whether or not we should be spending our Bitcoin. Would that stimulate the economy, the crypto economy a little bit more? Maybe. Well, they say Bitcoin is driving global growth in new ways while also preserving the store of value qualities that provide inflation protection and make it investable. Bitcoin is only a tiny fraction of the size of the markets it stands to disrupt, which reach well into the trillions of dollars. Now, stay with me. I'm going to show you in just a second. They say at the time that Bitcoin can work as digital gold. It's also a mobile payment platform and a currency for countries that are experiencing hyperinflation. And having a look right here at the world's money and markets, you could see Cryptocurrency is all the way over there at the end, down at $275 billion, roughly. It's probably a little different today, but roughly it's very low compared to some of these other ones. I mean, you could see gold well over 7.7 trillion, offshore wealth 10 trillion, 14.5 trillion global debt, 250 trillion global debt if you add it all together. I mean, it's crazy to consider how small we are, how early we are. So going back to this, Bitcoin is like gold in the 1990s. I mean, guys, just think about it right now. Like these boring times, this time right now where everyone's like, geez, Bitcoin, just do something. These are those times when we're going to look back and be like, wow, I'm so glad I was aware of Bitcoin, that I knew about it, that I had that opportunity to accumulate. And even if Bitcoin falls below 10 or whatever, I mean, realistically, I don't think we'll be there for that long. And I still think that, pulling up to VPVR, you'll notice great opportunities for accumulation between like this sort of $9,000 and $11,000 level, right? So definitely wanted to point that out moving forward. Also, just talking fundamentally here, we do have the hash rate basically at the all-time high. I mean, we're off by just a little bit, but essentially the miners are still doing fine. We're not seeing any of them capitulating. In fact, we saw Bitmain just order another, I don't remember the number. It was a few 100,000 units of the 7 nanometer chips, right? So you could definitely see that. And the stock to flow ratio, even if you do think that we're just due for an absolutely boring sideways movement, we're just going to be range bound for the next 9 months maybe, well, guess what? We still have the halving event coming up in May, and you can see right here as Plan B shows on his stock to flow ratio, we are looking for this massive spike up to about $100,000 Bitcoin sometime between 2020 to 2021. And you can see right here, yes, we deviate slightly up and down, but ultimately we are following this stock to flow ratio, and it does look like Bitcoin wants to push towards 100K after the next halving event. So I'm not going anywhere till then, minimally, guys. Minimally, if you are in these markets, as boring as it is, you got to stick around for the halving event, right? I mean, I just think that is probably going to be the most exciting thing that's going to happen next year, but where's the crazy price predictions today, K-Dub? There's no price predictions. Well, somebody actually pointed out this crazy price prediction. You probably already saw this, but this is from Hal Finney, and he wrote this back on January 3rd of 2009. And you can see right here, he basically just talks about an immediate problem with new currency is how to value it, right? I mean, when Bitcoin first came out, there was nothing to peg it to, nothing to compare it to, nothing to trade it on. Like people say, Bitcoin went to 20K and it fell down to 3. Oh my God, it's dead. But the fact that Bitcoin was birthed, out of a financial crisis and literally cost nothing when it came, I mean, with the exception of whatever the cost for the miners to mine it was back in the day. And now we had a Bitcoin that even saw 20,000. I mean, even saw $1,000, I think is amazing. Anyway, he says, as an amusing thought experiment, imagine that Bitcoin is successful and becomes the dominant payment system in use throughout the world. Then the total value of all the currency should be equal to the total value of all the wealth in the world. Current estimates of total worldwide household wealth that I have found range from 100 trillion to 300 trillion with 20 million coins. That gives each coin a value of about $10 million. So, do you think that Bitcoin could ever potentially hit $10 million? There is that video, right? $10 million endgame. Amazing video, by the way, by Token Vision. If you have not watched it, Google that right now. $10 million Bitcoin. It's a great documentary, guys. But yeah, so, I mean, even Hal Finney was making these outlandish predictions back in the day, right? So that's basically my topic about Bitcoin. Like I said, my ultimate end goal is just to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. Yeah, these sideways movements, they're boring as hell, not gonna lie, but you know what? Great opportunity to dollar cost average, right? Also, just want to talk about some quick news. So this company called Telx Technologies, they've unveiled the first ever crypto SIM card that will enable hassle-free transactions via SMS without any smartphone or internet, right? So it says users will be able to make transactions through their first dedicated crypto phone number. The Telx phone numbers will assume the role of the digital currency address. This will in turn save the customer's time required to copy and paste or type the tedious wallet addresses. Messages can be sent to the opposite party, whether they are Telx users or not. As a part of secure messages, Telx prohibits SIM swapping and phone number porting. Moreover, transactions can be exacted only with the proper PIN number, and only transactions sent from the user's unique SIM card will be recognized recognize backup keys will be provided by the company in case of theft or losses. So you're just seeing more ways to send crypto transactions, right? We've seen what GoTenna has done. We have Block, I forget their name, with the satellites, right? Bitcoin in space. So it's going to be pretty hard to kill this damn thing. And I think the government is very well aware of that. Also, so we had Laura Jane Grace. She's the lead singer of the band Against Me, and she actually ended up making a tweet saying that she was pissed off that every time she writes the word bitchin', it changes it to Bitcoin. She's like, what's a Bitcoin Camaro? To which actually people started replying, you can buy a Camaro with Bitcoin. Siri has a point. I'll give you financial advice. Broke Tesla, woke Bitcoin Camaro. So kind of funny. So I guess Bitcoin kind of got some accidental exposure due to Siri. Finally, ending on some pretty positive news, you have the U.S. presidential candidate Andrew Yang, who's actually trending on Twitter today, which is kind of interesting. He has talked about his open-mindedness towards the adoption of blockchain technology, especially in voting specifically during the electoral process. He actually says, one of my initiatives is that I want to move us towards online voting, but the reality is for the next at least couple of elections, we would need to have paper backup because right now it's not quite as secure as we need it to be, and the blockchain can't support activities at quite that scale yet. Potentially it could, and I'm 100% on board with moving us in that direction because it would be transformative for democracy if we could just vote easily and if we had total confidence in it. And I agree totally. It was a total shame to see what happened with Horizon State closing their doors. Now, I do know Agora is a company that or a blockchain voting company that has recently come out. A little bit different. They have their own blockchain platform, right? But it would be interesting, or they have their own protocol, I should say. But it is interesting to see if Andrew Yang would really push this moving forward. So the guy might have my vote so far, but let me know what you guys think about this. Let me know what you think about Andrew Yang as a presidential candidate, what you think about blockchain voting, and what you think about this damn sideways market. Oh my goodness, Bitcoin. All right, well, DCA it is, guys. That being said, don't forget, comment today if you want to enter for the Ledger Nano S. That is it. That does it for the entire week. Hopefully, tomorrow when the East wakes up, usually there's some kind of crazy price action Monday mornings, right? There tends to be, but, doesn't have to be. Bitcoin could just keep doing this for another week or so. That being said, guys, thank you so much for coming back to my channel. If you're not subscribed yet, definitely check it out. We do this every single